The day had been long, and Marcus Johnson was more than ready to get home. After a week of back-to-back meetings in another city, the thought of finally stepping through his front door felt like the only thing keeping him going. He adjusted the strap of his carry-on bag over his shoulder as he approached the bustling airport security checkpoint. The line ahead of him snaked around barriers filled with travelers eager to catch their flights or reunite with loved ones after days, or even weeks away. Marcus stood out quietly among the crowd, though not because he wanted to. His prosthetic leg made walking slightly uneven, but it didn't slow him down much. Years of physical therapy had taught him how to adapt, how to move forward despite the challenges life threw his way. To most people passing by, he looked like any other traveler trying to navigate the chaos of modern air travel. But there were subtle signs that hinted at his story. The confident yet weary look in his eyes, the faint scars peeking out from beneath his rolled-up sleeves, and, of course, the metallic gleam of his prosthetic leg catching the fluorescent lights above. As Marcus stepped closer to the conveyor belt where passengers placed their belongings for scanning, he noticed a young TSA agent watching him intently. The agent, whose name tag read Chad, seemed overly enthusiastic about his role. Chad's crisp uniform and polished shoes suggested someone who took pride in his job, or at least wanted others to think he did. As Marcus handed over his boarding pass and ID, Chad glanced down briefly before making eye contact again. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then came the first comment. "Wow, that's quite the accessory you've got there," Chad said, nodding toward Marcus's prosthetic leg. His tone hovered somewhere between playful and mocking, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few heads turned, curiosity piqued by the remark. Marcus froze for half a second, unsure if he'd heard correctly, when he realized Chad wasn't joking, at least not kindly. He forced a tight smile and kept moving. "That's right," Marcus replied evenly, his voice calm but firm. "It's part of my outfit today." His response drew a couple of soft chuckles from the people standing nearby, though they quickly masked their amusement with polite coughs when Chad shot them a glare. If Marcus was bothered by the comment, he didn't show it outwardly. Instead, he focused on placing his laptop, shoes, and jacket into the plastic bins provided. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, a testament to years of navigating similar situations without letting frustration get the better of him. But Chad wasn't done. As Marcus prepared to step through the metal detector, Chad leaned casually against the counter, arms crossed. "You know, we've got to check that thing too," he announced, gesturing vaguely toward Marcus's prosthetic. "Can't have anything sneaky hidden inside, can we?" This time his voice carried farther, drawing more attention from those around him. Some passengers exchanged awkward glances, while others pretended not to notice, burying their faces in their phones or shuffling nervously in place. Marcus paused mid-motion, gripping the edge of the conveyor belt. He turned slowly to face Chad, his expression unreadable. "I assure you," he said, his tone still measured but edged with steel, "there's nothing suspicious here. My prosthetic has already been cleared multiple times by your colleagues in other airports." Chad shrugged dismissively, clearly unimpressed by the explanation. "Well, rules are rules," he replied, tapping a clipboard for emphasis. "We've got protocols to follow. No exceptions." His words hung heavy in the air, punctuated by the hum of machinery and the shuffle of feet behind them. Marcus clenched his jaw briefly, then exhaled slowly. Arguing wouldn't help. Experience had taught him that resistance often led to more trouble than it was worth. So instead he nodded once and stepped aside, allowing Chad to guide him toward a secondary screening area. The walk to the corner of the checkpoint felt endless. Passengers continued streaming past, some glancing curiously at Marcus and Chad, while others avoided looking altogether. Marcus could feel the weight of unseen eyes on him, judging, speculating. It wasn't the first time he'd dealt with this kind of scrutiny, but that didn't make it any easier. Each step reminded him of the countless times he'd faced similar scenarios since losing his leg overseas. Back then, he'd promised himself he wouldn't let ignorance or cruelty wear him down, Yet moments like these tested that resolve. When they reached the designated area, Chad instructed Marcus to sit on a nearby bench so he could inspect the prosthetic more closely. Marcus complied silently, his hands resting on his knees as he watched Chad kneel down to examine the device. The agent's movements were clumsy, almost careless, betraying his lack of experience with such equipment. At one point, Chad accidentally nudged the prosthetic too hard, causing Marcus to wince and shift his balance abruptly. For a split second, anger flared in Marcus's chest, hot and sharp, but he swallowed it down, reminding himself that losing control wouldn't solve anything. "You should really take better care of this," Chad muttered, half to himself, as he ran his fingers along the smooth surface of the prosthetic. "Looks expensive." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Instead, he stared straight ahead, focusing on the distant wall lined with posters promoting vacation destinations. Beaches, mountains, cities bathed in golden sunlight, all images of freedom and adventure, starkly contrasted against the reality of his current situation. By now, a small group of onlookers had gathered, drawn by the tension radiating from the scene. Most kept their distance, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. Among them was an older woman with silver hair pulled back into a neat bun. She stood slightly apart from the crowd, her arms folded across her chest as she studied the interaction with keen interest. Something about her demeanor suggested she wasn't content to remain silent for much longer. Despite the growing audience, Chad pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the discomfort he was creating. He asked Marcus a series of intrusive questions about the prosthetic, how it worked, why he needed it, whether it ever malfunctioned. Each query felt less like genuine curiosity and more like thinly veiled mockery. Marcus answered as succinctly as possible, his patience wearing thin with every passing minute. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, Marcus spoke up. "You know," he began, his voice low but steady, "this prosthetic represents something important to me. It's not just a piece of equipment, it's a reminder of what I've sacrificed for my country. And for people like you to treat it like it's some kind of joke, that's disrespectful." For a brief moment, Chad faltered. His mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. The silence stretched taut, broken only by the distant chatter of travelers and the rhythmic beep of the X-ray machine. Then, just as suddenly, Chad recovered, brushing off Marcus's words with a smirk. "Hey, I'm just doing my job," he said, shrugging nonchalantly. "If you don't like it, maybe next time don't bring contraband to the airport." The comment hit like a punch to the gut, leaving Marcus momentarily speechless. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. What had started as mild discomfort among the bystanders morphed into palpable unease. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and several pairs of eyes darted accusingly toward Chad. Even the other TSA agents stationed nearby seemed to stiffen, sensing that the situation was spiraling out of control. And yet, amidst the chaos, Marcus remained composed. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and prepared for whatever came next. Little did he or anyone else know this encounter was far from over. As the secondary inspection dragged on, Chad's behavior grew increasingly aggressive. He seemed determined to prove a point, though what that point was remained unclear, even to himself. His earlier smirks had turned into outright sneers, and his tone carried an edge of hostility that made Marcus's stomach tighten. The prosthetic leg lay on the bench beside them now, its metallic surface gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Chad poked at it with a penlight, muttering under his breath about protocols and safety measures, though his actions suggested something less professional and more personal. "You know," Chad said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "this thing could hide anything, weapons, drugs, who knows." He glanced up at Marcus with a smirk, clearly enjoying the attention he was getting from the growing crowd of onlookers. Some passengers craned their necks to get a better view of the unfolding drama, while others shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact but unable to tune out the tension in the air. Marcus sat perfectly still, his hands clasped tightly together on his lap. He'd learned over the years how to mask his emotions when necessary, but inside, frustration bubbled like a pot on low heat. This wasn't the first time someone had treated him like a suspect because of his disability, but there was something particularly grating about Chad's attitude, his casual cruelty wrapped in the guise of authority. "It's been checked dozens of times before," Marcus said again, his voice calm but firm. "I've flown across the country multiple times this year alone. Nothing has ever been found." Chad waved off the explanation with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Yeah, well, mistakes happen, right? Better safe than sorry." He leaned closer, lowering his voice slightly, though not enough to prevent others from hearing. "Besides, I've seen some pretty creative ways people try to sneak stuff through. You never know." The implication stung. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain composed. Losing his temper wouldn't change anything. It would only give Chad exactly what he wanted, a reaction to justify his behavior. Instead, Marcus focused on the faces around him, searching for signs of support or understanding. Most people looked away when their eyes met his, unwilling to engage. A few, however, held his gaze for a moment longer, offering faint smiles or sympathetic nods. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind Marcus that not everyone agreed with Chad's methods. But Chad wasn't done yet. Emboldened by the lack of pushback, he decided to take things further. "Tell me something," he said, leaning back against the counter with an exaggerated air of curiosity. "How'd you lose your leg anyway? Car accident? Sports injury? Or—" He paused dramatically, glancing around as if seeking approval from the audience. "Something else?" The question hung heavy in the air, sharp and intrusive. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the hum of the security machine seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the weight of Chad's words. Marcus blinked once, slowly, before answering. When he spoke, his voice was steady, almost detached, as if recounting a story he'd told countless times before. "I lost my leg serving my country," he said simply, "in Afghanistan. During a mission that saved lives, including yours indirectly." There was a collective intake of breath from the onlookers. Some shifted uneasily, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Chad, however, didn't seem fazed. If anything, he looked amused. "Oh, so you're a hero now, huh?" he replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Not all heroes wear capes, I guess, but maybe they should come with warning labels." He chuckled at his own joke, though the sound rang hollow in the tense atmosphere. Marcus felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, hot and unrelenting. He clenched his fists beneath the table, digging his nails into his palms to maintain control. Part of him wanted to stand up, to confront Chad directly and demand respect, not just for himself but for every veteran who had sacrificed everything for their country. But another part of him, the wiser, more patient part, knew that wouldn't help. Experience had taught him that arguing with someone like Chad rarely ended well, so instead he took a deep breath and let the comment slide. "You have no idea what sacrifice means," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "And that's fine. Not everyone does. But mocking someone's disability isn't bravery, it's cowardice. And treating a veteran like a criminal isn't patriotism, it's ignorance." For a split second, Chad's smirk faltered. His mouth opened as if to retort, but no words came out. Instead, he busied himself with examining the prosthetic again, running his fingers along its edges with exaggerated care. The crowd murmured softly, the tide of opinion shifting ever so slightly. One man pulled out his phone and began recording the interaction discreetly, sensing that this moment might deserve documentation. Another woman whispered to her companion, "This is ridiculous. They're treating him like he's done something wrong." Meanwhile, Evelyn Carter, the older woman with silver hair who had been observing silently until now, stepped forward. She moved slowly, deliberately, her presence commanding without being overbearing. Her eyes locked onto Chad, piercing and unwavering. "Young man," she said firmly, her voice carrying just enough authority to silence the surrounding chatter. "What exactly do you think you're accomplishing here?" Chad looked up, startled. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job," he stammered, suddenly defensive. "Following protocol." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Is that what you call it? Humiliating someone because they're different? That's not protocol, that's cruelty. And if you ask me, it's shameful. Her words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Chad flushed red, his confidence wavering under her scrutiny. Marcus watched the exchange with quiet gratitude. He didn't know Evelyn, but her intervention came at the perfect moment. It was as if she'd read the room and decided to step in before things escalated further. Around them, other passengers began nodding in agreement, their earlier hesitation replaced by a shared sense of indignation. Someone muttered, "She's right," while another added, "This is unacceptable." Chad, sensing the shift in momentum, tried to deflect. "Look, I don't make the rules," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the TSA handbook tucked under his arm. "If anyone has a problem, take it up with management." "Oh, don't worry," Evelyn shot back, her tone icy. "I intend to." With that, she turned to address the crowd. "Does anyone else think this kind of treatment is wrong? Because if we stay silent, nothing will change." Her question sparked a wave of murmurs, then louder affirmations. "Yes," called out a middle-aged man holding a backpack. "This is ridiculous," echoed a young woman clutching her boarding pass. The chorus of voices grew stronger, building into a collective protest against Chad's behavior. Even the other TSA agents stationed nearby exchanged nervous glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. Feeling the pressure mounting, Chad scrambled to regain control. All right, he snapped, raising his hands defensively. "Let's keep moving, we're holding up the line." But his attempt to redirect attention fell flat. The damage was done and the crowd wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. It was then that Marcus noticed the supervisor approaching, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression. The badge clipped to his uniform identified him as Mr. Grayson, the head of airport security. He scanned the scene quickly, his gaze lingering on Chad before turning to Marcus. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by a flash of disbelief, and then shame. "Mr. Johnson?" Mr. Grayson asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Is that you?" Marcus nodded, unsurprised by the recognition. Over the years, his face had appeared in newspapers, documentaries, and even a segment on national television. His story was well known, especially within veteran circles. Still, seeing the realization dawn on Mr. Grayson's face was satisfying in a way Marcus hadn't anticipated. "Indeed," Marcus replied calmly, "and I assure you, I'm not carrying anything dangerous, unless you count integrity as a threat." The quip drew a few chuckles from the crowd, breaking the tension momentarily. Mr. Grayson winced, clearly embarrassed by the situation unfolding before him. He turned to Chad, his expression hardening. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Chad stammered, struggling to explain himself. I was just following procedure, sir. Checking for contraband." Mr. Grayson cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Enough. You've caused quite the scene today, Agent. Stand down while I handle this." Without waiting for a response, he turned back to Marcus, offering an apologetic smile. "Please forgive us, Mr. Johnson. This is unacceptable. Let me ensure you're processed quickly and respectfully." As Marcus stood up, retrieving his prosthetic and belongings, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also relief, gratitude, and a renewed determination to advocate for change. The encounter may have started poorly, but it had ignited something powerful. A conversation about respect, empathy, and the importance of treating everyone, especially those who've given so much, with dignity. And as he walked away from the checkpoint surrounded by murmurs of support and admiration, Marcus knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As the supervisor, Mr. Grayson, stepped in to take control of the situation, Evelyn Carter didn't step back. Instead, she stood her ground, her presence steady and unwavering. Her silver hair shimmered under the fluorescent lights as she crossed, her arms and fixed Chad with a piercing gaze that made him squirm visibly. She wasn't just an observer anymore, she was now a force to be reckoned with. "Mr. Grayson," Evelyn began, her voice calm but firm, "I don't know what kind of training your staff receives, But this young man's behavior is unacceptable. I've been watching him harass this gentleman for no reason other than his disability. And not only that, he mocked him when he tried to explain himself. Chad opened his mouth to defend himself, but Evelyn cut him off before he could utter a word. "Don't interrupt me," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You think you're funny making jokes about someone's prosthetic leg? Do you have any idea what it takes for someone like Mr. Johnson to walk through that checkpoint every day? To deal with people staring, judging, or worse, treating them like they're less than human?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their earlier discomfort now replaced by a collective sense of outrage. A few passengers even nodded emphatically, encouraging Evelyn to continue. One man, still holding his phone, kept recording, capturing every word she spoke. It was clear that Evelyn had struck a nerve, not just with Chad, but with everyone who had witnessed the exchange. Mr. Grayson looked deeply troubled, glancing between Chad, Marcus, and the growing audience. He knew this incident had spiraled far beyond a routine security check. Clearing his throat, he addressed Evelyn respectfully. "Ma'am, I assure you, we take these matters very seriously. If there has been misconduct, it will be dealt with appropriately." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by the vague promise. "Appropriately?" she repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Let me tell you something, sir. When a veteran, who gave part of his body for our freedom, is treated like a criminal because of his prosthetic, that's not just misconduct. That's a disgrace. And if you let it slide, then you're complicit." Her words hit hard, not just for Mr. Grayson, but for everyone within earshot. Even Chad, who had been trying to shrink into the background, flinched at the weight of her accusation. The truth of her statement hung heavy in the air, undeniable and damning. Marcus, meanwhile, remained quiet, observing the scene unfold with a mix of emotions. Part of him appreciated Evelyn's intervention. It was rare to find someone willing to stand up so boldly for what was right. But another part of him felt conflicted. He didn't want to be the center of attention, especially not in a way that painted him as a victim. Still, he couldn't deny that Evelyn's words resonated deeply with him. They mirrored the frustration he'd carried silently for years, the exhaustion of constantly having to justify his existence to people who refused to see past their own biases. Seeing the tension mounting, Evelyn softened her tone slightly. Turning to Marcus, she offered him a warm smile. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Johnson," she said sincerely. "And I'm sorry you had to endure this today. No one should be treated this way, especially someone who has sacrificed so much for all of us." Her gratitude was genuine, heartfelt, and it seemed to ripple through the crowd. Passengers who had initially kept their distance now stepped forward, offering nods of solidarity or quiet words of appreciation. A young woman carrying a toddler approached Marcus tentatively, extending her hand. "Thank you for everything you've done," she said softly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We owe you so much." Marcus managed a small smile, touched by the unexpected flood of support. "It's my duty," he replied humbly, "and I'd do it again if I had to." His words were simple, yet they carried immense weight, resonating with everyone around him. Chad, on the other hand, looked increasingly uncomfortable. The bravado he'd displayed earlier had completely evaporated, replaced by a mix of shame and panic. He glanced nervously at Mr. Grayson, hoping for some form of rescue, but the supervisor's expression remained stern. Clearly, Chad was on his own. Mr. Grayson turned to Marcus, his demeanor apologetic. "Mr. Johnson, please allow me to escort you through the rest of the process personally. You won't face any further delays or unnecessary inspections." He gestured toward a private lane reserved for dignitaries and VIP travelers, ensuring Marcus wouldn't have to endure another moment of scrutiny. Marcus hesitated briefly, considering whether to accept the offer. While he appreciated the gesture, he also knew that accepting special treatment might undermine the broader message he wanted to send. In the end, however, he decided to comply, not for himself, but for the sake of setting an example. Sometimes progress required compromise, and Marcus understood that better than most. As Marcus gathered his belongings and prepared to leave the chaotic checkpoint area, Evelyn stepped closer once more. "If you ever need anything," she said, quietly, handing him a small card with her contact information. "Please don't hesitate to reach out. People like you deserve better than this." Her kindness caught Marcus off guard, and for a moment he found himself at a loss for words. Finally, he nodded, slipping the card into his pocket. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice thick, with emotion. "That means a lot." With that, Marcus followed Mr. Grayson through the expedited lane, leaving behind the chaos and commotion. As he disappeared from view, the crowd slowly dispersed. Though the energy in the room remained charged, conversations buzzed around the terminal, with passengers sharing their thoughts about what they'd witnessed. Some expressed anger over how Chad had behaved, while others voiced admiration for Evelyn's courage and Marcus's composure. Meanwhile, Chad stood frozen in place, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. For the first time, he seemed to grasp the gravity of his actions. What had started as a misguided attempt to assert authority had spiraled into a public spectacle, exposing his ignorance and cruelty for all to see. He glanced around nervously, searching for some semblance of support, but found none. Even his fellow TSA agents avoided meeting his eyes, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright disgust. Mr. Grayson wasted no time addressing the issue. After ensuring Marcus was safely processed, he pulled Chad aside for a private conversation. "Agent," he began, his tone clipped and authoritative, "what you did today was unacceptable. Not only did you violate protocol, but you also disrespected a national hero. Do you understand the severity of your actions?" Chad nodded mutely, unable to meet Mr. Grayson's gaze. Tears welled up in his eyes, though whether they stemmed from guilt or fear was unclear. I didn't mean to," he stammered, trailing off when he realized how hollow his excuses sounded. "You didn't mean to what?" Mr. Grayson pressed. "Mock a disabled veteran? Humiliate him in front of dozens of people? Or maybe you didn't mean to remind everyone, hear why respect matters." Chad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I really am." Mr. Grayson sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as if warding off a headache. "Apologies aren't enough this time," he said firmly. "You'll be suspended pending a full investigation. And depending on the outcome, there may be further consequences. This isn't just about you. It's about maintaining the integrity of this organization. We can't afford to lose public trust because of behavior like yours." The news hit Chad like a punch to the gut. He stumbled backward, leaning against the counter for support. His dreams of being seen as competent and authoritative crumbled before his eyes, replaced by the harsh reality of his mistakes. For the first time in his life, he truly understood the weight of accountability, and it terrified him. Back in the terminal, Evelyn watched the aftermath unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She was glad Marcus had received the respect he deserved, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was symptomatic of a larger problem. Too often, society failed to recognize the humanity of those who were different, whether due to disability, race, gender, or any number of factors. And until that changed, stories like Marcus's would continue to happen. As she walked away from the checkpoint, Evelyn made a silent vow to herself. She would use this experience as fuel for advocacy, speaking out whenever and wherever she saw injustice. Because if one person's courage could spark change, imagine what a movement could accomplish. The revelation that Marcus Johnson was not just any traveler, but a celebrated national hero, sent shockwaves through the airport. Mr. Grayson, the TSA supervisor, stood frozen for a moment as his mind raced to process the implications of what he'd just realized. He knew Marcus's face. It wasn't one easily forgotten. The man in front of him had been featured on television programs, interviewed by journalists, and honored at ceremonies across the country. His story was legendary. A Black Army veteran who had saved dozens of lives during a harrowing mission in Afghanistan, losing his leg in the process. And now, here he was, being humiliated by an inexperienced, overzealous agent. Mr. Grayson turned sharply toward Chad, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. "Do you have any idea who this is?" he demanded, pointing at Marcus. "This man is a hero, a true patriot who sacrificed everything for our freedom. And you treated him like some kind of criminal." Chad's face blanched. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His earlier bravado had vanished, entirely replaced by sheer panic. He glanced at Marcus, then back at Mr. Grayson, his eyes wide with horror. For the first time, it dawned on him that his actions might have consequences far beyond a reprimand or suspension. This wasn't just a routine security check gone wrong. This was a public relations disaster waiting to happen. Marcus, for his part, remained calm and composed. He didn't relish seeing Chad squirm, nor did he want to be the center of attention. But he also understood the importance of accountability. If Chad walked away from this incident without fully grasping the gravity of his behavior, nothing would change. So instead of speaking up immediately, Marcus let the moment hang in the air, allowing Chad and everyone else to sit with the weight of what had transpired. "I don't need an apology," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, though tinged with quiet authority. "What I need is for people to understand why this matters. It's not about me. It's about respect. Respect for veterans, for people with disabilities, for anyone who walks into an airport expecting to be treated fairly." His words resonated deeply, not just with Chad and Mr. Grayson, but with the growing crowd of passengers who had gathered around. Some were still recording the scene on their phones, while others simply watched in stunned silence. Among them was Evelyn Carter, who nodded approvingly, her arms still crossed over her chest. She had ignited the spark of resistance earlier, but Marcus was fanning the flames into something bigger, a conversation about empathy, dignity, and the shared responsibility to treat others with kindness. Mr. Grayson cleared his throat, visibly shaken. "Mr. Johnson, please forgive us for this egregious oversight. On behalf of the Transportation Security Administration, I sincerely apologize." He extended his hand, which Marcus accepted after a brief pause. The handshake was firm, a silent acknowledgement that the apology, while necessary, was only the beginning of what needed to happen next. Turning to Chad, Mr. Grayson's demeanor shifted. Gone was the professionalism he'd shown moments earlier. Now his voice carried an edge of barely contained anger. "Agent, you are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Report to my office within the hour for further instructions. Do you understand?" Chad nodded quickly, his face pale. "Yes, sir," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact with both his supervisor and Marcus. He began gathering his belongings, his hands trembling as he stuffed papers and pens into his bag. For once, there was no trace of arrogance or defensiveness, only shame. As Chad slunk away, the crowd erupted into murmurs of approval. Passengers exchanged nods and smiles, clearly relieved to see justice served. One man even clapped softly, prompting a few others to join in. The applause was subdued but meaningful, a collective show of support for Marcus and condemnation of Chad's behavior. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. As the initial wave of relief settled, he stepped forward, addressing the crowd directly. "Thank you all for standing with me today," he began, his voice carrying just enough volume to reach everyone nearby. "It means more than I can say, but let's be clear, this isn't just about me. Every day, disabled individuals, veterans included, face discrimination and disrespect in places like this. Airports, grocery stores, workplaces. It happens everywhere." He paused, letting his words sink in. The crowd listened intently, their expressions ranging from sympathy to determination. Even the other TSA agents, who had initially tried to distance themselves from the situation, seemed moved. "By his speech, we deserve better," Marcus continued. "And so do you. Because when we fail to treat each other with basic human decency, we all lose. We lose trust. We lose compassion. We lose sight of what makes us strong as a community and as a nation." Evelyn stepped forward again, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. Well said, she murmured, her eyes shining with pride. Turning to the crowd, she added, if we want things to change, we have to start holding ourselves accountable. That includes calling out bad behavior when we see it, and supporting those who speak up. Her words earned murmurs of agreement from the passengers. Someone shouted, "You tell 'em," while another called out, "We've got your back, soldier." The atmosphere in the terminal had transformed completely, from tense and uncomfortable to united and hopeful. Meanwhile, Chad sat alone in a corner of the staff break room, replaying the events of the past hour in his mind. He couldn't believe how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. What had started as a routine shift had turned into a nightmare, exposing flaws in his character that he hadn't even realized existed. The image of Marcus's stoic expression haunted him, the way the veteran had refused to rise to the bait, choosing instead to remain dignified despite the provocation. Chad buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by guilt. He thought about the stories Marcus must have lived through, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, the pain endured. How could he, Chad, ever compare? In that moment, he felt smaller than he ever had before, not because of the reprimand or potential job loss, but because he knew he had failed to see Marcus as a person. Instead, he'd reduced him to a stereotype, a target for his own insecurities and need for control. Tears streamed down Chad's face as he resolved to make amends. It wouldn't erase what he'd done, but maybe, just maybe, it could be the first step toward redemption. Back at the checkpoint, Mr. Grayson approached Marcus once more, this time with a more personal tone. "Mr. Johnson, I'd like to invite you to meet with our leadership team tomorrow morning. We want to hear your thoughts on how we can improve our training programs and ensure incidents like this never happen again." Marcus hesitated briefly, considering the offer. He knew systemic change wouldn't come overnight, but he also recognized the opportunity to influence policies that could benefit countless travelers in the future. "All right," he said finally. "I'll come, but I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for everyone who deserves to feel safe and respected when they travel." Mr. Grayson nodded, gratitude evident in his expression. "Understood. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You won't regret it." As Marcus prepared to leave the terminal, the crowd parted respectfully, creating a path for him to walk through. Strangers patted him on the back, shook his hand, or simply offered heartfelt smiles. It was a surreal experience, one that reminded him of the power of unity and the importance of speaking truth to injustice. Evelyn accompanied him to the exit, her presence a comforting constant throughout the ordeal. "You handled that beautifully," she said as they reached the doors. "Most people would have lost their temper, but you stayed calm and focused. That takes real strength." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Strength doesn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes it's about knowing when to rise above." Evelyn smiled, clearly impressed. "Well, whatever you call it, you inspired a lot of people today, including me. Keep doing what you're doing, Marcus. The world needs more voices like yours." With that, they parted ways, each carrying the memory of an extraordinary encounter that had sparked something greater than either of them could have anticipated. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been difficult, but it had also been a reminder of why he continued to fight. For justice, for equality, and for the belief that every person deserved to be treated with dignity. And as he drove home, the video of the incident spreading across social media platforms, Marcus knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of a much larger conversation. The days following the airport incident felt like a whirlwind for Marcus Johnson. News of the confrontation spread rapidly, fueled by the viral video captured by one of the passengers. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, ranging from outrage over Chad's behavior to admiration for Marcus's composure and courage. Hashtags like #RespectOurHeroes and Stand with Marcus began trending nationwide, drawing attention not only to the specific incident, but also to broader issues of discrimination against veterans and individuals with disabilities. Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight once again, though this time under very different circumstances. Journalists called incessantly, requesting interviews. Talk show hosts invited him to share his story on their programs. Advocacy groups reached out, eager to collaborate with him on campaigns aimed at improving accessibility and respect in public spaces. While Marcus appreciated the support, he was careful not to let the sudden fame distract him from his original mission, fostering meaningful change. True to his word, Marcus attended the meeting with TSA leadership the next morning. The conference room was filled with high-ranking officials, all of whom greeted him with solemn expressions and sincere apologies. Mr. Grayson introduced Marcus as a national treasure, emphasizing the importance of learning from the incident to prevent future occurrences. For nearly 2 hours, Marcus shared his experiences, both at the airport and throughout his life as a disabled veteran. He spoke candidly about the challenges he faced daily, from inaccessible facilities to dismissive attitudes, and offered practical suggestions for improvement. One of his key recommendations was implementing mandatory sensitivity training for all TSA employees, focusing specifically on interacting with veterans and individuals with disabilities. It's not enough to teach people how to follow procedures, Marcus explained. You need to help them understand why those procedures matter and how they impact real people. Empathy should be part of every job description. The TSA leadership listened intently, taking copious notes and asking thoughtful questions. By the end of the meeting, they had committed to launching a pilot program based on Marcus's input, with plans to roll it out nationwide within 6 months. They also promised to review existing policies to ensure they prioritize dignity and respect for all travelers. It was a small victory, but Marcus knew it was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Chad wrestled with his own demons. After being suspended, he spent several sleepless nights replaying the events at the airport in his mind. Each memory felt like a fresh wound, reopening feelings of guilt and shame. At first, he tried to justify his actions, telling himself that he was simply following protocol and hadn't intended to hurt anyone. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. His behavior had been fueled by arrogance and ignorance, traits he now despised in himself. Desperate for guidance, Chad reached out to his older sister, Sarah, who worked as a counselor for at-risk youth. Though they weren't particularly close, she agreed to meet him for coffee. As they sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, Chad poured out his heart, confessing everything that had happened. To his surprise, Sarah didn't scold him or dismiss his remorse. Instead, she listened patiently, offering words of encouragement when appropriate. "You messed up, Chad," she said gently after he finished speaking. "But messing up doesn't define you. It's what you do next that matters. If you're truly sorry, prove it. Learn from this experience and figure out how to make things right." Her advice resonated deeply with Chad. Over the next few weeks, he immersed himself in research, reading articles and watching documentaries about veterans, PTSD, and disability rights. He learned about the physical and emotional tolls of war, the struggles veterans faced upon returning home, and the systemic barriers that often made their lives harder than necessary. The more he read, the more ashamed he felt, but also the more determined he became to change. Chad decided to write a letter to Marcus, pouring his thoughts onto paper in hopes of expressing the depth of his regret. It took him multiple drafts and countless revisions before he felt satisfied with the final version. When the envelope was ready, he mailed it with trembling hands, unsure whether Marcus would even bother to open it. "Dear Mr. Johnson, I hope this letter finds you well. First, I want to say how deeply sorry I am for my behavior at the airport. There's no excuse for what I did, and I know an apology can't undo the harm I caused. But I need you to know that I regret my actions more than words can express. Since that day, I've done a lot of soul-searching and self-reflection. I realized that my behavior stemmed from ignorance and insecurity. Not malice, but that doesn't make it okay. I've spent these past weeks educating myself about the sacrifices veterans like you have made and the challenges you face every day. It's opened my eyes to so much that I took for granted before. What you said to me during our interaction, that mocking someone's disability isn't bravery, it's cowardice, has stuck with me ever since. You are absolutely right, and I'll carry those words with me for the rest of my life. I hope someday I can earn your forgiveness, though I know that's not something I deserve. In the meantime, I've decided to leave my position at the TSA and pursue a new path. Inspired by your example, I'm enrolling in a counseling program to work with veterans struggling with PTSD and reintegration into civilian life. It's my way of trying to give back, however small, to the community I wronged. Thank you for showing me grace when I didn't deserve it. Your strength and dignity inspire me to be a better person. Please take care of yourself and know that I'll always remember the lessons you taught me, even if we never cross paths again. Sincerely, Chad. When Marcus received the letter, he read it carefully, his expression unreadable. At first, he wasn't sure how to feel. Part of him wanted to dismiss Chad's apology as too little, too late. But another part recognized the sincerity in the words and the effort Chad had clearly put into reflecting on his mistakes. After sitting with the letter for a while, Marcus decided to respond. Not because he owed Chad anything, but because he believed in the power of second chances. Dear Chad, thank you for reaching out and sharing your thoughts. I won't lie, it wasn't easy reading your letter. What happened at the airport affected me more than I let on, and it brought up memories I'd rather forget. But I appreciate your honesty and willingness to confront your actions head-on. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong and even more courage to try to make amends. I commend you for taking steps to educate yourself and for choosing a career path that will allow you to support others. That speaks volumes about the kind of person you are capable of becoming. While I don't hold grudges easily, trust is something that must be earned over time. If you're serious about making a difference, stay committed to the work ahead. Listen to the stories of veterans and disabled individuals without judgment. Advocate for policies that promote inclusivity and accessibility, and above all, treat everyone you meet with kindness and respect. I wish you the best of luck on your journey, Chad. Remember that growth often comes from discomfort, and redemption is possible for those who seek it earnest way you. Months had passed since the airport incident, and Marcus Johnson's life had taken on a new rhythm. The viral video of his encounter with Chad had sparked widespread conversations about respect, empathy, and systemic change in public institutions. While the attention was flattering, Marcus remained focused on the bigger picture, using his platform to advocate for meaningful reforms. He became a sought-after speaker at conferences, workshops, and community events, sharing not only his personal story but also actionable steps for creating more inclusive environments. One such event was a national conference titled Building Bridges Toward a More Inclusive Society. Held in a sprawling convention center, the gathering brought together leaders from various sectors, government officials, business executives, educators, activists, and everyday citizens, all united by a shared goal of fostering understanding and equity. Marcus was invited to deliver the keynote address, a role he accepted with both pride and humility. The day of the conference arrived, and the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Attendees filled the seats, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and admiration as they waited for Marcus to take the stage. When he finally appeared, walking confidently despite his prosthetic leg, the room erupted into applause. Marcus paused for a moment, soaking in the energy before stepping up to the podium. "Thank you," he began, his voice warm yet commanding. "It's an honor to be here today, speaking alongside so many incredible individuals who are working tirelessly to make our world a better place." He paused, scanning the crowd with a thoughtful gaze. "But I have to admit, standing here feels surreal. Not long ago, I was just another traveler trying to get through airport security without incident. And now, because of one moment of humiliation, I find myself in a position to influence real change." The audience chuckled softly, breaking the tension. Marcus smiled briefly before continuing. "That moment taught me something important. Even the most difficult experiences can become opportunities for growth, if we choose to see them that way. For me, it wasn't about seeking revenge or punishment. It was about starting a conversation about how we treat each other, especially those who are different from us. He went on to recount the details of the airport incident, weaving humor and vulnerability into his storytelling. He described Chad's initial mockery, Evelyn's courageous intervention, and the collective outrage of the passengers who stood up for him. But rather than dwelling on the negative aspects, Marcus highlighted the moments of humanity that emerged. The strangers who offered words of support, the TSA supervisor who recognized his mistake, and even Chad's eventual letter of apology. That letter meant a lot to me, Marcus admitted, his tone softening. Not because it erased what happened, but because it showed me that people can change if given the chance. We often focus on holding others accountable, and rightfully so. But accountability isn't the end goal. It's the starting point. True transformation happens when we extend grace, create space for learning, and work together towards solutions. Marcus then shifted gears, discussing the tangible changes that had resulted from the incident. Thanks to his collaboration with TSA leadership, sensitivity training programs were being implemented nationwide. Airports were installing more accessible equipment, and signage promoting inclusivity had become commonplace. These developments, while significant, were only the beginning. Marcus urged the audience to think beyond policy changes and consider the cultural shifts needed to sustain progress. We need to move away from seeing differences as obstacles, he said, his voice rising with conviction. Instead, let's celebrate diversity as a source of strength. Whether it's race, gender, disability, or background, every perspective adds value to our communities. When we embrace that truth, we unlock endless possibilities. By the time Marcus concluded his speech, the audience was on its feet, applauding thunderously. Many attendees wiped away tears, moved by his message of resilience and hope. Others rushed to the microphone during the Q&A session, eager to ask questions or share their own stories. One woman, a wheelchair user, thanked Marcus for shining a light on accessibility issues she faced daily. A veteran spoke about the importance of mental health resources for returning service members. Each story reinforced the urgency of the work ahead. After the conference ended, Marcus mingled with attendees, exchanging contact information and brainstorming ideas for future initiatives. Among the crowd was Evelyn Carter, the silver-haired woman who had stepped in at the airport. She approached him with a wide smile, her eyes twinkling with pride. "You did it, Marcus," she said warmly, giving him a firm handshake. "You turned a painful experience into something beautiful. I couldn't be prouder." Marcus grinned, touched by her words. "I couldn't have done it alone, Evelyn. You were there when I needed support the most. That kind of courage inspires others to act." Evelyn waved off the compliment modestly. "Nonsense, you're the one making waves now. Just promise me you'll keep going. You've got a lot more good to do in this world." "I will," Marcus promised. "As long as there's work to be done, I'll keep showing up." Meanwhile, Chad had begun his journey toward redemption. After leaving the TSA, he enrolled in a counseling program specializing in trauma and rehabilitation. His coursework challenged him intellectually, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege bias and systemic inequality. At first, he struggled to keep up, overwhelmed by the complexity of the material and the weight of his past actions. But over time, he found his footing, drawing strength from the mentors and classmates who believed in his potential. During his internship at a veterans outreach center, Chad met individuals whose stories mirrored Marcus's in many ways. He listened intently as they shared their struggles with physical disabilities, PTSD, and societal stigma. Slowly but surely, he built trust with these men and women, earning their respect through consistent effort and genuine care. By the time he graduated, Chad had transformed from the arrogant agent at the airport into a compassionate advocate dedicated to helping others heal. When Chad heard that Marcus would be speaking at the conference, he debated attending but ultimately decided against it. Instead, he sent a brief email congratulating Marcus on his success and reiterating his gratitude for the lesson learned. Though they never crossed paths again, Chad carried Marcus's example with him always, striving to embody the same grace and resilience in his own life. As the years passed, the legacy of that fateful day at the airport continued to ripple outward. Marcus remained a vocal advocate for marginalized communities, leveraging his influence to push for legislative reforms and corporate accountability. Evelyn stayed active in grassroots movements, mentoring young activists and organizing community forums. Even Chad, once a symbol of ignorance, became a beacon of hope for veterans seeking guidance and support. The story of the security agent who mocked a black veteran's prosthetic and later realized he had humiliated a national hero became a powerful reminder of the transformative power of forgiveness and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. It proved that even in moments of conflict and pain, there lies an opportunity to learn, grow, and build a brighter future for ourselves and for generations to come.